Before we jump into this week's episode of Major Pain, I will remind you that I am not a medical professional. Please do not take any medical action based off what you hear on this podcast without first consulting your doctor.
I didn't know there was a whole community behind being chronically ill.
It doesn't just become a story of disability, because that's really a universal story.
We got to be strong. We have no choice but to be strong.
Welcome to Major Pain. I'm your host, Jesse Mercury, and this week I'm so excited. We have a really interesting story to share with you from our guest, Mindy Uhrlaub. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you today. Before we jump into your story, let's get to know you a little bit. So, Mindy, why don't you tell us about yourself?
I am a resident of Northern California, and I am a Virgo. Just kidding. Actually, I am Virgo, which makes me very meticulous and clean and loyal. I am a wife and the mother of 2 sons who are college-aged, and I am an author, an activist, a recovering musician, and filmmaker.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
And yeah, I saw your drums there in the background. I was thinking maybe we'd break into song here in a minute.
I'm game if you're game. Absolutely. What sort of music do you make?
I play and played in a band called 40th Day. We were out of Denver, and we were like just at the very beginning of where kind of new wave met grunge back in the 80s.
Oh, cool.
And so we opened up for bands like Smashing Pumpkins and stuff like that. So,
Oh, wow.
so yeah, we were a touring band, and I have the hearing aids to prove it.
You opened for Smashing Pumpkins?
Yeah, we used to open up for bands like that. We went on tour with Kansas when they had their 20-year reunion. And
What?
played a bunch of like stadium shows and stuff.
That's unreal. Whoa, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so it's funny. Like people are like, "Oh, we just thought you were like this suburban mom in Northern California, kind of boring suburban mom." I'm like, actually, I'm a little bit,
I'm a rock star.
a little
Wha-
bit. Yeah.
What's it like to reach that level and then have it in the past? Is there a sadness with that?
No, because right now I feel like I'm more influential as an ALS activist than I ever was as a musician. And I think that, it just, one of the cool things is that I'm on stage a lot right now, and I'm on camera a lot right now. And I feel like I'm using those muscles from being in a band, to do stuff like this.
That's so cool. Yeah, I had this is a topic of therapy for me all the time. Is like, my music career sort of stopped when my chronic illness took over my life. And I am now in a very stable place. I have a diagnosis finally and medication. I mean, stable as I've been, although, I still have flare-ups all the time. I have to be really careful. I'm not playing in a band anymore. I'm making content all the time and making music and definitely flexing those muscles, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of booking gigs because I still, evenings is the time where I flare up the most, and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to be there, So
Yes.
I feel very conflicted about doing it at all, besides like in the safety of my, recording studio where I'm at right now. So yeah, so it's very, interesting to talk to someone who reached the level that I was trying to push towards, and like I definitely, I think I will always have a feeling of I never quite made it, but I love what I'm doing now, and I love where I'm at now, and my body is sort of dictating in a lot of ways where my life is headed, which has just been a very conflicting experience for me.
Well, it's also like you're living what you know, and you're sharing it with other people, which is probably a gift that you could be giving the way that you would be giving if you were a musician too, because, putting music out in the world is like, it's like a gift to other people, but this is also a gift. So I don't think that it's any lesser of a gift.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And, I absolutely love what I'm doing here on this podcast for sure. And having a chronic illness connected me to this whole world that I never would have been a part of otherwise, that has been very powerfully meaningful in my life. So life is surprising.
Totally. So I'm part of the fatal disease community,
Mm,
and that's similar because there's no hopeful community like a sick community, right? So
mm.
it really is something to be part of, the chronic illness.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about, uh, what we're talking about now. These are things that like it is life and death, and it matters so much. And to go through it alone is so hard. And to put your face out there and to be up on a platform saying, "Hey, you don't have to do this alone." I mean, that has fundamental meaning beyond what pure entertainment can have. I think. I don't know. We're speaking in generalities here, but I think you get what I'm trying to say as far as like it's important.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Okay. Well, let's get into this. Mindy, what is your major pain?
My major pain is dealing with the specter of a fatal disease and the grief and the worry that comes with it.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit before we started here, and this has just impacted your life in so many different ways. What is the disease that we are talking about here?
It's called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's also called ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. And I'm a carrier of one of the genes that causes ALS.
Yeah, and you mentioned to me that this has impacted the people around you and your family.
Yeah, I lost my grandfather. I lost my mother. I have a relative who has symptoms. And I also have two college age kids who are at genetic risk of developing this disease should they test positive for the gene.
Yeah. And can you just shared this with me before. It was so interesting. Can you tell us again the statistics around the gene that you carry and the potentiality of developing ALS?
So I carry the C9ORF72 gene. It's responsible for both ALS and frontotemporal degeneration, which is a kind of dementia. When you're talking about ALS, which is, I don't know if we mentioned it, it's a wasting disease where you become paralyzed, generally in the limbs first or the mouth first, and then you you become paralyzed in the rest of your body. So in this disease, if you have 100% of people suffering from it, you know, something like 85 to 90% are sporadic cases, meaning we don't know what causes those cases. But there's a small percentage of us, 10 to 15%, and it is, it's passed down through generations in your family. And this gene that I carry accounts for something like 40 to 60% um, of the genetic causes of ALS. And there are more than 40 genes that actually cause ALS. And they're discovering new ones every day. So go
Wow.
figure that.
Yeah. So, and what is the statistic for you personally, your risk factor for with this gene, carrying this gene? What is the likelihood that you will develop ALS?
That's the $64,000 question, isn't it?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is that they used to think that people with this gene had like a 97% chance of developing ALS sometime in their lifetime.
Hmm.
But there's this thing called gene penetrance, which is basically like how powerful the gene is in making the disease actually happen. And they're finding that this particular gene is less penetrant than some of the other genes.
Hmm.
And it's something like, a 30 to 40% chance of developing disease, but that is all dependent on how many members of your family before you had symptoms before they died. And so it's just very tricky. I mean, you can be a genetic carrier and never develop any symptoms. You could develop ALS and FTD, or you can develop ALS or FTD. And so it just keeps you guessing. Um, it's really hard to be a caregiver to somebody who has both diseases because dementia is its own hell and ALS is its own hell. So, you know, you hope that you don't get symptoms, but there are things you can do to prevent symptom onset, and that's where, for me, that's kind of where like the rubber meets the road. Like
Mm.
that's where a lot of my work and advocacy occurs.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with that. What are the things you can do to try to prevent symptom onset?
Well, I mean, they're showing that veterans are like twice as likely as most of us to develop ALS, and part of that is for like traumatic brain injury or from chemical exposures. And people with traumatic brain injury also include like football players, anybody who has a sport where they might, hit their head really hard, rugby players, and people who work with small particles like woodworkers tend to have higher rates of disease. And so, for me, it's like it's not like I have to try hard not to play football. Like, that's not, for me, that's not a big deal breaker. But, I try to live, where the water and the air are clean. I don't like to be exposed to chemicals any more than anyone else does. But having a gene like this makes me more likely to develop the disease. And so, I'm on kind of like what could be called a neuroprotective diet also. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I don't really drink alcohol. I don't even drink caffeine. I don't, things that inflame my gut, I don't eat them because I think they might inflame my brain too. So, there are things I'm doing to stack the deck in my favor. I'm on a drug that's an ALS drug, and I'm taking it prophylactically before symptoms actually happen.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense in your case. What is that drug?
It's called Riluzole, and it's been around since 1995. It's very well tolerated by people, and I just have to have my liver function checked once every 3 months.
Do you know anything about the mechanism of this drug, how it functions in your body?
I don't. I'm not a doctor, even
Yeah.
though I play one on a podcast. No, actually, I don't. I should know that, but I don't know that.
I mean, that's the beauty of this show is, you know, almost always none of us are doctors. And this is just the practical application, not the theoretical. So I never expect anyone to know any of the doctor stuff, but
Right.
sometimes, but it's just interesting things to talk through. Um, it sounds like this has been a specter over your life for a long time. If your grandpa and your mother, but was there a period in your life before you knew about this potential?
Oh, yeah, I just found out in 2018.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
Oh, okay.
my mom just died in 2020.
Oh, wow.
What's really frustrating is that they only discovered this C9 or F72 mutation in 2012, which
Wow.
was which was after my kids were born. And
Okay. This
so,
this yeah, wow. This like reshapes everything in my mind here. Okay, sorry, continue.
yeah, it isn't just that, like, if you know that you have this gene in your family, you can prevent yourself from passing it on to future generations because
Right.
there's IVF and, pre-implantation, all kinds of engineering that you can do to make sure that your kid doesn't end up with ALS.
Wow.
But
That's fascinating too. Oh my god.
yeah, but the thing is, my kids are already born, and
Yeah.
I'm already born, so I can't
Yes.
retrofit myself unless, like, CRISPR technology comes along and fixes my genes for me.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
so interesting. And
yeah,
when did your grandfather pass?
he passed, right before I was born, so, like, 1969, and then my mom didn't develop symptoms until about, let's see, she died in 2020, it was, like, 2016 when she started having symptoms.
Okay.
So what's really hard is, like, she had a lot of PTSD from watching her father die of ALS,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then, like, she started with these symptoms and nobody knew because they were like, "Well, ALS isn't, it's not genetic," and the neurologists were just like, "There's no way it's ALS. It's such a rare disease." The truth is 1 in, like, 300 people will develop ALS in their lifetime, so it's not that rare. but there is a genetic link in a very small portion of cases. And so, she was diagnosed with lupus, carpal tunnel syndrome, MS, Lyme disease, and a bunch of other diseases. Nobody wanted to think it's ALS because how could that happen twice in one family? Well,
That's unreal, unbelievable. It's so fascinating and such a good reminder. We talk about this on this podcast all the time. Just because a doctor says something isn't possible doesn't mean it's not necessarily possible. It could be that the science isn't there yet. We haven't proved this yet.
right,
Yeah, and my disease, I have mast cell activation syndrome and small fiber neuropathy, and my doctors have told me that it is not genetic. But I have talked to people on this podcast who are mother-daughter who have the disease, and it's like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? Maybe we haven't discovered the link yet. And I mean, it sounds like that's exactly what happened in your family. The link had not been discovered
right,
until just a few years ago.
right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and so what's interesting is when she started showing symptoms, um, I actually went and had the genetic test anyway, and she hadn't even had the test,
Mm,
and I came back positive, and
wow.
she ultimately got her test results. She had her test after I had mine because I think she was like, "Well, if you have the balls to do it, I have to do it too," you know? And so we got our test results on the same day, which I thought was really interesting. She got hers, she did the test, she got the results the same day. I had mine, I mailed mine in, and so we were just like, "Guess what?" And so, yeah, it's this, gift that just keeps on giving to our family. And, she felt horribly guilty about it. She was like, "I'm so sorry I did this to you." But, like, how are you gonna know back in 1969 that this
Right.
happens, right? And so,
Yeah, literally with doctors telling you it's not possible in 1969. That's
yeah.
yeah, not anyone's fault except maybe these doctors who are unwilling to admit when they don't know something sometimes.
Well, I think this is the idea of, like, like, how do you get ahead of a disease like this? How do you make sure that you're ready for it when it happens? How do you uh, prevent it? And to me, it's through research. It's through enrolling in as much clinical trial, like longitudinal research or trial opportunities that you can. I think that's really the trick because without people in research, they're never going to solve the problem.
Absolutely. And it also raises an interesting question of, is it better to know or not know? Where if you don't know that it's even a potential and then it never happens, you never worried about it. But if you do know it's a potential, uh, you have the opportunity to do what you're doing with this neuroprotective diet and avoiding certain exposures and educating yourself and participating in trials and furthering research and writing books. And it just, I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to hear your take on that.
Well, I mean, just because I don't know that I carry the gene doesn't mean I won't pass it on to my kids.
Exactly.
And they better know, so they don't pass
Yeah.
it on to more people. So, like, I think it's kind of irresponsible to not take the genetic test, especially if you have children. But, but that's just me. Like, I felt like I would be irresponsible by not knowing.
I think that's where I would
Um,
land too, is I would want knowledge.
yeah. And not only that, but like knowing that I carry this gene has been like the greatest gift to my life. Like, it's made me such a better person. It's made me such a better activist. It's made me, more passionate about the life that I do have. And it makes me very clear, like laser focused about what I'm willing to handle and what bullshit I'm not going to be able to. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that on the air.
Oh, that's
I don't
totally okay.
I don't suffer jerks well. Like, I used to be able to, like, handle being with whomever, and, like, I could kinda just, like, roll with it. And now I'm like, I'm not spending time with people I don't like anymore
Yeah.
because, like, I'm at the age when disease onset happens now, like, mid-50s, and I wanna have as much fun and love the world as hard as I can while I can.
That's beautiful. And, you know, in a very different experience, lines up with my experience of chronic illness of this has made me a better person. You know, this
Yeah.
challenge has forced me to look at my life, what's making me happy, what's not, and veer into the things that make me happy and work for my body. And
Yeah.
it's helped me make some really important decisions that have really benefited me, and it's connected me to this community. So yeah, but totally different scenario. But you know, it's just always interesting to hear that echoed by someone else, that these challenges can be a gift.
Yeah.
So, okay, was it 2016 that your mom was diagnosed?
No, she wasn't diagnosed until 2018.
Symptoms in 2016.
Yeah.
Oh wow! So two years of doctors telling her there's no way it's ALS. You have Lyme disease. You have something else.
Yeah.
That's the journey that I lived as well for many years of like, or being told it was all in my head, or, you know, all the medical gaslighting I went through.
Yes.
Yeah. Your mom went through that. Did she go through any of that as well? Doctors sort of brushing off symptoms and doubting that it was serious?
So the thing about the ALS clock is that most people die within 2 to 5 years. So if you have symptoms 2 years ago, you're already too late to enroll in clinical research. Like certain trials will not even enroll you if you don't have a forced vital capacity of X, meaning you can't breathe with a certain amount of strength. They won't even let you into a trial. And so she did not qualify for anything by the time she was actually diagnosed with the right thing. She didn't qualify for anything, and I don't know if you've seen anyone with ALS, but it's really heartbreaking because, you know, they lose one body part, you know, the use of one body part, and then it just is like a it's like an avalanche, like a cascading effect of like, you know, first the left foot and then the right foot and then, you know, the left hand and then the right hand and then she's in a wheelchair and then she can't breathe and then she can't, you know, and you know, for her, she really believed in like original equipment. She didn't want like a feeding tube. She didn't want a ventilator. She didn't want anything that would extend her life. She wanted her life to be over as soon as possible because she did not want to have to suffer. And she and I are just like really different in that way, you know? Like for me, because I'm younger and I already know I have the CNI disease, right? Even if I don't have ALS yet, it's like I'm going to do everything in my power to live long enough to see a cure, to live long enough to see my kids have a cure, you know, because when you're a parent, you don't love anyone like you love your children.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This must have been so hard as a daughter to watch this happen to your mom.
Yeah. And, you know, I learned a lot about empathy and about surrender by watching her. She was really, really strong, um, but strong in a way that was not going to help her against ALS. And so, um, you know, she didn't want help in the house, you know, this kind of like just very stoic, you know, and I would not be that stoic. And, but, you know, I had to learn how to not tell her, like, you need help. I'm hiring help for you. Like, she wouldn't, like, that's not my job. You need, when someone is dying, you need to let them live and die the way they want to go. And that's it between you and me. Like, you know, one of the beautiful things about living in California is you can figure out how you want to go. And yeah, sorry, I'm just I'm just vamping on California and, you know, medical aid in dying and that kind of thing. It's a thing. I think about my mortality a lot, but
Yeah.
I feel like at the tender age of 56, that's a really important thing for me to be thinking about. And I'm glad I have the opportunity to know about it.
Yeah. Are you comfortable sharing what the laws are in California?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you live in California and you can prove that you lived here for a certain amount of time and you're under a doctor's care, you know, and if you have a fatal disease and it's really clear that you only have, I don't know what the timing is, less than a year to live, less than 6 months to live, you know, you can choose to end your life, but it's not so easy. It's not, you know, there are a lot of people who end up flying out of the country to do this. And I think the thing is that the reason they do that is because they don't want their loved ones to get in trouble for helping them and their lives. And yeah, I mean, she lived in Florida, and I had the I had the um, hospice worker calling me and asking me, "Can I give her more morphine?" And I'm like, "Am I going to get charged with murder if I say yes?"
Wow.
Like it's there are only like 7 states right now that have the medical aid in dying laws. So um, I don't know. I not to be morbid, but I do think about it a lot.
Yeah. Well, nobody can understand that calculation unless they have to make it,
Right.
And what does it mean to you to have agency in that realm?
Fantastic. I mean, ALS takes everything from you. So, like for me, I want to be in charge of my life. Like, enrolling in research gives me agency over the disease. Writing a book gives me agency over the disease. Raising tough, resilient boys gives me agency over the disease. But mostly, like, I can think right now, okay, if I start to have a symptom, like I know now what it is, even if doctors are going to gaslight me, and I'll move into a house that's one story rather than being on a two in a I mean, I know it sounds like so obvious, like why wouldn't I live in a one-story house now, And so I can think about stuff like that. I can think about, I mean, for me, like I truly believe in a patient's ability to have control over their environment. And so if you're in a wheelchair, like to have access to as much of your house as you can have, if you can financially afford it, you should do it. Like, why not? So anyway, there's that, but also, I mean, I pretty much have a to-do list. Like if I start having symptoms, I already have a to-do list that I've written. And, moving out of a two-story house is the first thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. When before getting a diagnosis, I had very severe mobility issues, and that was a huge part of our calculation of moving. And we actually found a house with a lift in it. That
Oh, you
was,
did?
yeah. We live in a house that was built for a gentleman in a wheelchair. So
Perfect.
just yeah, incredible. And I just used my wheelchair for the first time in like a year the other day during a bad flare up. So it's been a while. But then being in this house and, being able to get out the front door and roll down to the street instead of having stairs, it's just like, it's not possible unless it's built this way, and not that many places are. So
Yeah.
it's such a gift.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it when we found this place. Um, so what was your relationship like with your mom?
I would say that, like a lot of kids who tend to not take the normal path, like instead of joining a sorority, I joined a band. And, that can be very upsetting to some parents. And so I think she was a little more conservative than I was in that way. We had some years that were pretty fraught during my rock and roll life, but in general, like we always understood each other. We were always pretty close, even though we went through those rocky years in my, 20s. She and I have a lot in common, and we enjoyed a lot of the same things. She loves the crossword puzzle. I love the crossword puzzle. She loves Scrabble. I love Scrabble. We communicate in the same way. We have the same sense of humor. And, when she was really sick, uh, we each tried to control the situation in opposite ways. And so, yeah, I mean, relationships between moms and daughters can be really fraught. And ours, despite the fact that we had ALS in common, it got very simple at the end. So
In what way?
everything was just boiled away to just love. And
Mm,
we just loved each other as much as we could. And because there's nothing, what else is there to do, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, and so I'm so interested by your mom's experience with her dad, and then she must have had some fear her whole life of what she saw happen to her dad, happen to her. Even if doctors are telling her it's not possible, I can't imagine any way that you see that and don't think at least once, what if this happens to me? Is this something that she talked to you about at all?
I think it was an unspoken thing. I think she always knew deep down what it was. And I think that my brother and I both knew deep down what it was. And, um, but when I actually heard the words, I have ALS, that was 2017, 2018. And I was in the car at the time. I had to pull over because I was crying so hard. And like my husband had to come ride his bike over and drive me home. Like I couldn't drive home. I was absolutely hysterical. So my guess is she probably had a similar response. But what's interesting about it is that I think she felt very alone in this. Like even though I was a carrier, I don't think she knew any other people with ALS. And I think that for me, like one of the very first things I did when I found out that it was in our family was I started looking for other people who carried the C9 gene. And through that searching, I found people who are not only carriers, but who are bringing children into the world. And we started an organization called End the Legacy. And our organization is for genetic carriers of ALS and FTD. And I feel like having that community is what keeps me from spiraling into like the doomsday scenario of the way that my mom felt. I don't spend a lot of time having like Woody Allen hands and being like, oh my God, it's gonna happen. Like I'm not neurotic about it. But that's because I and friends of mine and I have created a community where we don't let each other really go there. Like we're all very sometimes we get emotional, but like I don't feel alone in this the way that she felt alone. And so being able to share that kind of nervousness actually really helps.
Yeah, tell me more about End the Legacy.
So and the legacy was formed. It started like a bunch of people on Facebook were kind of chattering, and then they decided to approach an organization, a bigger ALS organization, to start like a familial group. And that familial group started, but it became so big that we needed to move. We were with IMALS, and we moved from IMALS and we started our own organization after like 2 years. And we have our own 501(c)(3) under another umbrella organization. But we do webinars, we educate people, we do policy making, we go to DC and we go to the Hill and we talk about patient rights and genetic non-discrimination. We just had our third, we're planning for our third annual in-person summit. And it's fantastic because we have like these monthly Zoom meetings where we see people from around the world, and now we're actually coming together physically and being able to, hug each other and be with each other. And so we do all kinds of things, but mostly we're advocates, and we teach each other how to talk to people about ALS and FTD, because a lot of people are just like, they think Lou Gehrig, or they think Eric Dane, who's very popular right now, who's a famous ALS person, or they think, Bruce Willis with FTD, but they don't really see what those people are going through. They don't, and like three-quarters of my friends have ALS, and I have a lot of friends, and they're just an incredible. It's a population that I'm really proud to be part of.
Yeah, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, there's I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, and there's an actor in Star Trek. I believe his name is Kenneth Mitchell, if I'm remembering
Mhm,
correctly, and
mhm.
he played a Klingon in season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, and
Okay.
then was diagnosed with ALS. And
Really?
they brought him back as another character who they worked his disease into a new character and had him come back without all the Klingon makeup so you could see his face and play someone else a
Amazing.
couple seasons later, which I just thought was so cool. And he's, traveling to Star Trek conventions but over the years, yeah, I mean, you see the development, the progression of the disease, and it is rapid and it is dramatic. And
Yeah.
I just, you know, this is, I think of ALS as one of the hardest diagnoses to have. I mean, you talked about that 2 to 5 year window, and
Right.
it's just, it's really hard for someone like me on the outside to wrap my brain around it. I was actually tested for ALS during my diagnostic process.
So you have
Um,
weakness or something like muscle
I,
weakness?
I have muscle weakness, muscle spasms. I was in a wheelchair for a while, just couldn't get the signals from my brain to my legs. But then I got on mast cell stabilizers and I was out of the wheelchair within a couple of months, which is how I got diagnosed because we never got positive test results for mast cell activation. But the response to the medication was so extreme. That's like, well, this has to be it,
Right.
according to my doctors. But there will always be a piece of my brain. There will always be a piece of me that's like, what if it's something else, And time will tell.
Do you see a neurologist for that or what? Who?
It's actually an allergist.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, it's a dysfunction of the white blood cells that deal with allergens. And I've seen many neurologists, and that's who tested me for ALS and Huntington's disease, which ALS and Huntington's, I want to be sensitive about talking about these diseases. I can only talk about my personal experience
Right.
when I say those two diagnoses were the ones that scared me the most.
Right.
And this form of dementia is also I think that's also makes that list of, these are very scary diagnoses to have.
Yeah.
Because when you think about your individuality and who you are, one affects your body and one affects your mind. And those are, the mind body connection, like that's who we are, is our mind and our body. And, that it's just scary to think about losing one or the other.
But like I said, we were talking about this. Like the more you know, the less scary it is.
Hmm.
And there were things that used to trigger me, that scared the crap out of me. There were things that would trigger me early in my journey, and they don't trigger me anymore.
Wow, I'd love to hear more about that.
One of the things that happens when you have ALS is that you lose control of your tongue and your throat. And so it sounds, I don't know if you've ever heard anyone with ALS who has bulbar symptoms, but sounds like a record that's slowing down, or it sounds drunk. Your speech is garbled. And my mom got like that at the end. And it was very, very hard for me because my mom was very articulate. She was a Spanish teacher and, she spoke languages and she was a great singer and all this stuff and very, very smart. And to hear her mush mouthing when she was talking really bothered me. And right after she died, I became friends with a lot of ALS patients. As I said, I became part of the community. And anytime I heard someone with bulbar symptoms, I would have to leave. I couldn't handle it. It was just too much. It was PTSD ish for me. And for me, just more exposure to it, like it doesn't even bother me it doesn't bother me. And I understand people better now. I've become more empathetic not only to them but to myself. Of course I couldn't hear that. Of course that was my mom's last symptom. That's why it was so upsetting to me.
Yeah.
The thing is that the self-awareness that you get through illness, it not only makes for good writing, but it makes for good healing, you know? And you probably in your journey, my guess is that you were probably just like, this is something I can do. It's going to be hard, but I can still do it. Or this is something I just have to let go of.
Oh, yeah,
And
exactly.
and this surrender or acceptance, or you know when to fight for something and you know when to give up.
Yeah, I mean, before getting a diagnosis, I used to say, just tell me what I have. I
Right.
don't care what it is. I just want to know what it is.
Right.
MS was also in the mix for me. I was just like, I started to want to be diagnosed with MS just to have a diagnosis. And I feel, oftentimes I feel like I sort of hit the diagnosis jackpot as far as something that is treatable. And
Amazing.
the treatment, I mean, the treatment has really, really worked for me. And I'm getting very emotional just talking about that because I'm years into it and it's still continuing to work. I'm going through a little bit of a rough patch right now. I mentioned, needing the wheelchair a couple of days ago, and it's because I'm pushing too hard and I'm trying to do too much because I lost a lot of years and I'm trying to catch up. And this is another common topic in therapy is like, it's not a race. And the more I treat life like a race or like I treat it like I'm behind, the more damage I'm doing to my body because I need to live slower.
And
Uh,
rest.
yeah,
Rest.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. But I love, I love that I was diagnosed with mast cell activation. I love that. I love it. I love my diagnosis. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. I don't know if I've ever really even processed it, how true that is for me, that I'm just so grateful to have it. And it's a weird thing to say. It's something that people outside of our community can't understand. But when you don't know what's happening in your body, to finally have an answer and to have tangible steps to take makes all the difference in the world. And yeah, I mean, you're really putting some things, this is why I love doing this so much. You're putting so much in perspective for me as far as, the value of these experiences and also facing fear and how fear is often built around the unknown and not understanding. And the more, as you said, like the more you learn about ALS, the less fear you have. And the more you seem to be armed with knowledge and acceptance and compassion, self-awareness, empathy. It's beautiful, it's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you. It actually, it is a gift. It's a gift. And I do think that I shouldn't be so smug and say I'm not afraid, because there sometimes I'll take a cognitive I do a lot of I'm enrolled in like 20 longitudinal studies. And so I do cognitive testing a lot for FTD. Sometimes it'll come back a little wonky. And usually it's because it's one that's done online and I'm not a very fast like mouser. And so they'll be like, well, you either have FTD or you're just not a great typist. And I'm like, well, I probably am just not a great typist. Um, or like I have had like a pinched nerve in my foot or something. And I had like a little drop foot, and I went in and I was like, tell me this isn't ALS. And they're like,
Wow.
well, it
My
could be
God.
ALS,
Oh my
and
God.
or things like I have as you age, certain parts of your face start to drop. I have a palate that has kind of, your palate is supposed to kind of be like symmetrical, but one side of mine goes like this. And my doctor's like, you have a tented palate. And I'm like, so? And they're like, well, a tented palate is one of the first symptoms of bulbar onset ALS. And so I had to go do a bunch of, you know, s- extra studies, and during waiting for results from those studies does make me nervous. Like I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
is this the day when the ALS monster has taken me by the hand and is bringing down the wrong path? But I just don't have time to really think about that right now. like
Yeah,
I,
it's not about not being afraid,
yeah,
No, it's about cultivating a sense of peace
yeah,
within this within the situation, which you have done. I mean,
right.
which is, I mean, so awesome, so impressive. It's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, and it's inspiring. It's very, very cool. I have to ask you about being a mother
Yeah,
and, finding this out about yourself, about your mom and about your grandpa. And like, once you find out your mom has ALS and then like all these research studies have been done. Like you get the genetic testing done, you learn you have this gene, this thing that has been a part of you your whole life that you didn't know about. Suddenly these pieces all fit together and you understand something about yourself that maybe on some level you already knew, but were told was not real. And then it's real. And you have kids. You already have kids. And, you know, the genetics have been passed. What did you feel in that moment?
Okay, so this is the book that just came out, is my finding out that I'm a genetic carrier
Mm.
of ALS. It happened against the backdrop of my husband had stage 4 lymphoma at the time, and
Oh
I
my
was his
God.
caregiver.
Oh,
Okay, so I was his caregiver back in 2018, and he was going through chemotherapy. And if he didn't go through chemotherapy, he was gonna die of lymphoma. So I had other fish to fry, kind of.
yeah.
I also had 2 kids. One was 12 and one was 14, and the 14-year-old was really struggling, like, with behavioral issues, and he he was neurodiverse, and he was breaking a lot of rules and started breaking laws, and we had to have him committed to a residential treatment facility. So my older son was really struggling. My husband was struggling. My mom had ALS and was dying of ALS. So I had 3 first order relatives in life-threatening situations when I found out that I was a carrier of a gene that was probably gonna kill me.
Mm.
And, like,
You can't even process it in that moment. It's like
well, I mean, I processed it, but it was a lot. I said, in the book, it was kind of like a boil on my butt, like it didn't bother me unless I sat with it wrong, like it
That's so
wasn't
good.
it wasn't quite like it was like, like, okay, this sucks, but, like, does it really suck that much? I mean, I could have ALS, I could be committed to a residential treatment facility, I could have cancer, but it computed, but it didn't. I don't it just never really freaked me out, I guess, honestly. It I worry about my kids because, um, they run anxious, and they run anxious. They come by that honestly because I run anxious too. But I think that they see me, like, being an activist and fighting for all the things that I'm fighting for, and they see that I'm not gonna take any crap that ALS is gonna throw my way, And I think I've learned to be a good role model for them. So all I can do is be a good parent. I can only do what I can do. Everything aside from my mom's story has had a very, very positive outcome. My husband Kirk is alive and well, thank God, and because of science. And my older son, is well. He's living independently and has a job and a girlfriend, and he's living his best life. And my younger son made it through and is in college and is happy. And like, we're all very happy here. Um, and I think that they know what it looks like when the family is not happy.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the book is about, like what it's like
Yeah.
to raise kids.
Yeah, cool. What and tell us the name of your book?
Oh, the book is called Last Nerve. Oh, sorry, it's really bright.
Last
Last
Nerve.
Nerve,
There it is.
and it's a memoir of illness and the endurance of family, and it's basically about how I went from ALS worrier to ALS warrior.
Yeah, amazing. I should have mentioned in the beginning that you're a published author.
I am. Actually, I'm a published author a couple times. I have a couple books out, but this one
Tell
is.
me more.
I also wrote a book called Unnatural Resources, and it's about a girl growing up in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Huh.
And so
Interesting.
that's how my activism started, and
Is that fiction, nonfiction?
it's fiction.
Oh, wow. And what inspired you to write that?
Oh, I read another book called King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild, and it got me really interested in, like, women's issues in Congo. And so went to Congo when my kids were little
Ah.
and did some research in a war zone, which, like, even now I'm just like, wow, I actually did that. I actually went to Congo twice. The book came out right when the pandemic hit, like right in 2020. So it was hard to have book events, right? I mean, I did a couple
Sure.
online, but that book is actually doing really well now that I've been on tour with this one. I've
Mm,
been on tour with Last Nerve for about 6 months, and I always bring copies of the other book, and now that book's doing better. So
cool.
there's a silver lining to all this, you know, insanity, which is that, sometimes activism pays off in unexpected ways, right?
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Do you feel comfortable thinking about the future?
Oh, I think about the future all the time. Yeah. I have a bucket list. I'm, making my way through it, which is great. Like, I have made the decision that I'm not going to get ALS. And, I could decide that and still get ALS, but I've decided I'm not going to live with ALS, I guess is the best way of saying it. And I think that when I think about the future, I foresee meeting my grandkids, and I foresee meeting my grandkids who are not carrying the C9 expansion. And, uh, I'm looking forward to my next book, and I'm looking forward to going to Greece someday. And yeah, I mean, there are just things I want in the world. I think that the best thing to do when faced with a fatal disease is, make plans, make plans to live your life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when my disease future was uncertain, I really focused on living in the present,
Yeah,
which I had never realized that I wasn't doing, and it has fundamentally improved my life to be more aware of the present moment.
right.
Um, this is a hard question, and feel free to tell me I don't like that one. I don't want to answer it. Um, my wife and I are in the process of putting together an adoption profile to adopt. We want to have kids, and we're really interested in adoption. Um, and I will say that part of that equation is the uncertainty about my disease. And doctors are telling me it's not genetic. And even if it is genetic, I know that you can live with it. But I also feel very complicated feelings about the idea of what I've been through being passed on, or even, mutating and being worse. And yeah, I don't, so this is, something that I think about. And I don't know where I land on this right now, because there's definitely a part of me that also wants to have bio kids, but
Right.
we're sort of pursuing both. And right now the adoption journey is sort of taking over because it's feeling really good to both of us. And yeah, we're working with a adoption consultant, and we're filling out our profile, and it's fun, and it's something we're doing together. And we may, this time next year, we may have an adopted child. We'll see.
Amazing.
Yeah, but I'm curious about your feelings about living with this gene,
Mhm.
and obviously you have bio kids,
Right,
so and it wasn't a piece of the equation then.
right.
And I'm not implying at all that you would not have wanted to have your kids. I'm not implying that in the slightest, but I am curious to ask you, if you had known
Yeah,
that you had this gene when you were having kids, would that have changed your approach?
absolutely. And absolutely. I would have investigated anything possible to not bring kids into the world that were at risk of getting ALS.
Yeah.
And that said, I would never do anything to change the kids that I have because I
Yes.
adore them and I would never want
Yes.
them to change, sickness or in health, right? But if I had the opportunity to do IVF, to use my egg and my husband's sperm, put them together and check them to see if they carry ALS first before pre-implantation.
Whoa, that's possible. That's crazy.
I would do that.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned this in the beginning. I'm glad we're circling back to this, because I did want to ask you about this. Like, what can you do? And it sounds like that's the answer, is
Well,
you
you can do
you
that, or you can
fertilize an
also,
egg and then
yeah,
check it. Wow,
or
before
you can
implanting.
also get a donor egg
Sure.
And like for me, I'd get a donor egg and my husband's sperm and implant that, and then at least one of us would be the parent, right? I mean, there are lots of ways to have bio kids,
Yeah.
but they're expensive and they're time consuming, and sometimes you find this out, when you're 38 years old or something, and it's too late to even think about that. And so,
Sure.
depending on like my I would really worry about my own life expectancy bringing kids into the world. Like if I were sick right now, I would worry about bringing kids into the world just because I'm 56, right? I'm like too old to bring kids into the world at this point. But if I had known then, I probably would have done IVF with pre-implantation testing. I think it's called PGT, pre-implantation genetic testing, I think is what it's called.
Wow.
Um, I would have done
Fascinating.
that, and if that became too expensive or too much of a like, if it would became too hard in whatever way, I would have thought maybe donor egg, and then maybe adoption. I don't know what order in which, I think I would want to do what I could to have my own kids. That's just me, though.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think adoption is amazing, and I think not only is adoption amazing, but I mean, you're doing the world a service. You're giving a child a gift that you couldn't give a bio kid, right? And there are a lot of kids who need good homes. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that answer. I have one more question for you. So I'm a big sci-fi nerd. I love to wrap up with hopping in a time machine. If you could hop in a time machine and go back in time to the day where you pulled over on the side of the road, you just found out your mom has ALS. You've learned so much since then, and you have
Yeah,
integrated this into your life in such a beautiful way.
yeah.
If you could distill the message, what would you tell yourself about what you have learned?
Well, I would probably tell myself that I was gonna have to surrender certain things, that I wasn't gonna be able to control everything, but that I had agency over my own life, and that I could choose at that point whether to live in fear or, like, with the security that I still have agency over my life. Like, I think in that moment, I was feeling probably pretty despondent, and that, I never thought that my mom's death could actually teach me anything, and it taught me so much, and I'm as much as I hated to have her leave this world, she taught me so much about the way that I wanna live my life.
Thank you so much. Mindy, this has been a really, really amazing conversation today. I I just can't believe, 5 years into making this podcast, still having these discussions. It just like so profound every time. And I mean, this one just really, really blew me away. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an absolute joy. Please tell us again about your book, where people can go to find it, or anything else that you would like to share with our audience.
Okay, so first, I would like to share with the audience that End the Legacy is a nonprofit organization for genetic carriers of ALS and FTD. If you or your family has ALS or FTD and you have a genetic connection with them, then please come and look us up. Also, my new book, Last Nerve, a memoir of illness and the endurance of family, is out. It was an overnight bestseller on Amazon, but you can certainly get it anywhere books are sold, especially your local brick and mortar bookseller. And you can check me out at mindyuhrlaub.com or on Instagram at Mindy Writes One.
Awesome. I'll put your website in the show notes for this episode. I'll tag you on Instagram when this goes live. And I just have to thank you again for sharing such a personal story, but there's so much in there that is so valuable for the rest of us based off of this experience that you've lived through. Um, And just, wow, thank you so much for coming on the show and spending your time with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was really great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Major Pain. I'm Jesse Mercury, your host and the creator of this podcast. Artwork by Egg Salad Salad. Podcast production provided by Mary Chan of Organized Sound Productions, with editing and post-production from Katie Pagich and show notes writing from Shannon Kirk. Our theme music is the song Time Machine from my synth-pop album Sci-Fi, now streaming everywhere. Join our community on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, all at Major Pain Podcast. Our email address is majorpainpodcast@gmail.com. Learn more about this podcast and browse our collection of episodes at majorpainpodcast.com.